Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is Ken Diamond. I'm a practice development manager here at Insight. And if you haven't heard, Insight is a global solutions integrator serving any of our IT needs around the world, whether it is data and AI, modern infrastructure, modern workforce, or even cybersecurity. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about Insight, please go to insight.com/solutions for a little introduction. Now, today we're going to be covering Modern Edge, and we're going to break this up into three segments. We're going to cover trends, technologies, and tactics. But before we get into it, I have the great pleasure of introducing Dave. Dave, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Excellent. Thanks, Ken. Very excited about this conversation here today. I know we're going to be covering a lot of dynamic topics, many moving parts that a number of our customers are facing all across different sizes and verticals. So certainly an interesting one to get into. Hey, everyone. I'm Dave Abbott. I am with Cisco Systems. I am a cross-architecture technical solutions architect, an absolute mouthful. But essentially, I'm showing up every single day excited to talk about the convergence between our networking capabilities with cybersecurity requirements and how we can address both connectivity and security needs across no matter the branch, the user, the application, making sure that it's all secured and performing in an optimal manner. So with further ado, Ken, let's start getting into the modern edge.
Sure. Now, let's take a little history lesson on what actually makes up the modern edge. First, when we all started networking, we actually had to go somewhere. We had to plug in physically, and that was the network. Well, now it is everywhere. It's no matter where we go, we can't get away from a network. So we went from enabling with users and compute, and now we have sensors at the edge, and now we're enabling business requirements across the spectrum, across all verticals. So, we have this term, Internet of Things. What is that? Those are just sensors on the edge. We have modern edge. Well, we're applying a little bit of intelligence to it or smart to it, compute resources to that edge. And we're actually going to cover it a little bit more later on, but we're also making that edge a little bit more intelligent, applying AI so that you can make decisions at the edge. Now, as we go through these topics, we want to kind of dig a little bit deeper into specific trends, technologies, and tactics. The first thing is, how are we enabling the edge? Dave, what does it take to enable that edge, and what are some of the capabilities and frameworks that are required?
Yeah, what's interesting on the IoT aspect is we've now hit that inflection point where there's more IoT devices out there than typical user devices. Before, when we were building our networks and considering how the WAN needed to be constructed and what we had to do at the edge, it was primarily with the idea that, well, this is an end user's device, a cell phone, a laptop, a desktop, right? And we would build controls around that, and then everything else was a one-off. Those printers, I'll put them in a different VLAN, or I'll profile them in a different way. I'll tackle that later. Well, we're at the point where there's more of those IoT devices like cameras and sensors and, the door stops, and in manufacturing environments, we've got sensors galore where it's not about an end user's device. It's about all of our devices. And one, how are we connecting them? Two, how are we securing them? And three, how are we processing the data that's coming from them? And so when we think about what it takes to enable the edge, we have to get out of the mindset that we are user first and get into the thought that we're device first. Where we have to be able to ensure that we know what the device is, its posture, its capabilities, its OS, and where it's trying to communicate to, and build that least privileged access policy around it. And so when we think about what it takes to enable the edge, you have to have something that provides a platform, something that gives you visibility across the switches, the wireless systems of connectivity at the access layer through where your security on firewall and your router lives, right? It's got to be end to end of sharing context. The challenge becomes if you are just assuming that the access layer is provisioning based on the identity control and profiling, and then we allow that over the rest of the network. you're falling behind the times. You're not able to segment things appropriately. You're not able to control the traffic appropriately, and maybe not computing the digital experience requirements needed for what we need in the 21st century. So when we think about what it takes to enable the edge, the first is, how do I take on identity control for the devices that I have to allow into my network and extend that across my entire fabric, not just right at the edge of the network at my WAN and not right at the edge of my access layer, but end to end a platform that delivers that visibility and functionality. And there's a couple frameworks that we can lean into, like secure networking, secure access service edge, zero trust models. But those are fairly extensive frameworks that we have to take on. And so some of it comes down to prioritizing, where do we start? What technology do we already have at our disposal, and maybe just haven't adopted newer functionalities around it. And I think, ultimately there's other verticals that have to deal with this more often. And Ken, being in the field, I know Insight is supporting small customers all the way to our massive enterprise service providers and federal agencies. What types of verticals are you seeing or needing to start leaning into a more modern edge approach?
Well, we're actually seeing it across all verticals, but we do see some leaning in a little bit more than others. One, healthcare. With what has transpired with COVID, a restricted workforce, they need to be able to enable and make things more efficient at the edge in their hospitals, at their clinics. So we're seeing everything from, automated robot pill dispensers to, crash carts that are online. That are able to pull information directly from these endpoints so that they can make better decisions, faster decisions, and make things a little bit more streamlined for that end user experience, especially when it comes to a hospital. That's critically important. We're also seeing the other end, where in logistics, supply chain, industrial resources, everything from PLC systems and automating your delivery systems, or we even have a great case study that we're going to highlight a little bit later, but actually having automated forklifts within their warehousing and leveraging this technology to make things smoother, easier, more efficient, so that these businesses can do what they're supposed to do, which is run their business, be more efficient, generate revenue, or save costs. So we're seeing it across the entire gamut of this. We actually do have a great segment. You brought in security, which is my background, very near and dear to my heart, very important. And back to your statement, is it user first, device first? No, it's always security first. Without security,
very true.
Right? It doesn't matter. So, what is some of the security evolutions that are taking place at the edge? How are we able to enable while maintaining security with the modern edge?
Yeah. So, back when all of our applications were hosted on-prem and it was all in a centralized data center it was pretty easy to create high-level macro segmentation to say, hey, got all of our corporate devices here on these VLANs. I've got a guest network, and maybe we've built out a separate OT network, right? Completely parallel to the IT infrastructure. And then we're going to route it all back into a data center because that's where my firewall lives. And that's going to create a decision on, is this allowed outbound to the internet? Is it supposed to be inbound to an application? And we've got this very clearly defined line of where my security enforcement happens. And what we've seen as an evolution is that those enforcement points have to become distributed. They have to live closer to where the connections are starting. They have to also be happening at our applications themselves. So we need to distribute where the enforcement and inspection is occurring. And what that means then is I either have to leverage something that lives locally at the edge, whether that is on-prem firewall embedded in my SD-WAN appliance, or is an agent-based approach. But I also could start leaning into more of a cloud native type deployment, something that allows inline inspection. You see, another aspect to an evolution around the modern edge is knowing that our applications have become more distributed. They're not typically living in that on-prem data center anymore. Sure, we might still have some private apps that live there, but we've seen a plethora of our customers move into SaaS-based applications, move into infrastructure as a service with AWS and Azure, or start to leverage co-locations where it's not infrastructure they own anymore, but they're essentially renting or leasing that space out, but it's not in a central DC. And so by moving into something that's more cloud native, is it allows that inline inspection to wherever that destination is. I don't have to worry about resource constraints. I don't have to worry about sizing my router or firewall to be able to turn on advanced security controls. I think one of the other evolutions that we're seeing here is what security actually needs to be enabled. So when we think about the old school mentality of, oh, I'm going to do things at layer 3, what's my IP address and what VLAN can I access? We have to move away from that as applications become more dynamic and devices are having larger and wider requirements of what they need to reach out to. So I now need to start to use technologies that are very application aware, layer 7 rule sets, and can start to do more advanced content control than I ever did before. Things like decryption at scale and web filter functionality, file type controls, data loss prevention. These are all things that require pretty extensive compute. And if I don't have an endpoint agent that can be running on all devices, I need to be inspecting that in line somehow. So there's this evolution of distributing the enforcement and requiring more advanced security controls that go beyond a layer 3 IP-based segmentation. And I think that leads into some of the frameworks we were addressing. And Ken, I know you've worked on a number of segmentation and zero trust type projects before. Can you walk us through what that type of journey might look like as a customer is evaluating their evolution of their own infrastructure?
Yeah, so there's that challenge, right? Are you going full in one of the frameworks, zero trust, or are you just trying to do that segmentation? And again, depending on where you are in your journey, we have a lot of organizations and a lot of customers that have what we refer to as tech debt, which is they have older gear that they sweated a little bit longer than they should have, or their software isn't the latest and greatest version, which is okay because we are able to work within those realms to make it more secure, to make it more efficient, to actually leverage the modern edge without having to break the bank to do it. So there are opportunities that we can walk them through on executing and attaining what their goals are. But let's take zero trust. Zero trust is one of those security frameworks from NIST, and Insight follows the NIST architectures because of the fact it does give you that framework on end to end. This is how you implement it. These are the tools that you need to implement it. And these are abstracted from the actual tool sets. Now, I know you work for Cisco, but it no longer works whether it doesn't matter if it is whoever is providing that tool underneath, as long as you follow the framework and is able to fulfill the requirements for that, then you actually have a solution. Now, with that said, we are looking for that integrated platform solution to provide these offerings. And the reason why is a more integrated platform play makes it easier on the organization or the operating staff, whether it is managed services or internal operations, to be able to actually integrate that, operate it, and monitor it. Because again, if you can't see it, you can't monitor it, you can't identify any anomalies, you can't verify whether it's working or not. Now, when you're looking at zero trust and applying that framework to your existing architecture, we have to identify what you have. We have to identify what resources you have as far as internal from an operation perspective, what type of workforce that you have, and are they capable of attaining that? Is there any additional enablement? Then you look at how are you going to implement it? What devices are you going to implement it? How is it being implemented within your organization? Is it something that is edge facing? Are we looking at PLC controls for or industrial engineering capabilities, or are we talking about a warehouse? So we walk you through that entire process to help you identify exactly the tools and techniques and the needs to build that structure for your organization. Now, our background is, Insight is one of the largest ICE implementers on the planet. We've actually done some of the largest implementations very successfully. We run deep as far as identity services engine with Cisco. This is one of those things where when we talk about network access control and segmentation and applying policies to that, we actually have the chops that and the capabilities to walk any organizations through that process. The two, I guess, gating whether or not to go to one or the other, it goes back to what are you leveraging, how are you leveraging, and eventually you do want to get to that zero trust model, and each step of the way getting you closer and closer. Well, segmentation gets you closer to it. The zero trust model implementation gets you there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And one of the things too, it's funny when you first said ICE, I was hoping, this is a Cisco and Insight call, so hopefully folks on the call know what ICE is. But Identity Services Engine is a critical component to how we secure our campuses and our edge by providing network access control on both the wired and wireless side, but then able to transport that segmentation throughout the entire network fabric, ensuring that enforcement, again, is distributed and doesn't always just happen right directly at that access layer. One key point, too, is that ICE will work with a plethora of third-party devices. So you do not need to be all Cisco, but Ken, you brought up an excellent point of when it's an integrated platform, it makes it easier. Where there's native benefits that you get so that it's going to work, it's fully secure, and you can automate some of that functionality built on our orchestration models so that you're not just in the ICE tool set day in, day out. So, yeah, I love that. And one of the things that we want to think about here, too, is we're talking trends. I know there's a lot of focus around zero trust right now, but there's another buzzword that's been buzzing in everyone's ear, isn't there? That's the good old two-letter acronym of AI. Everyone's talking AI. How do we leverage AI? How do we use it within our own model? What tool sets can I buy that do AI? And I think at this point, if you don't say AI at least 50 times in a call, your stock price is going to go down 10%. That's what happens. So how do customers start to actually leverage AI? I mean, the challenge that we've always faced from an OEM perspective is, do we want to incorporate AI ourselves? Do we want to enable customers to leverage AI in their own way, in their own infrastructure? And the answer should be both. Yes. So there's a lot of ways that we're dynamically adding AI into our own product sets, such as using generative AI for interacting with your tools, whether that is on a security tool, your network tools, your collaboration tools. I want to be able to talk to my firewall and say, hey, can Ken access SharePoint out of this link? Like, it should be that easy. Now, so we're doing a lot of development work there, but there's also the side around predictive. What's happening on my network? Or is there a number of indications of compromise that are sprouting up between endpoint and my firewall and my network detection and response that I want to stitch together and leverage predictive AI to know about a potential malware or malicious breach? So those are all great things that we can embed. But I think in the modern edge conversation, the bigger trend is, how can customers start to use AI? How do they actually implement AI using their own data? And are there off-the-shelf aspects they can use, or do they need to build their own? Are there large language models that they can start to incorporate? And it comes down to, do customers want to start building training models, train their own AI, or do they just want to leverage it for more like inferencing? Hey, I'm going to take this black box of Llama 2, ChatGPT, something that's brought down into my own infrastructure, and run that against my own storage. So I either run that on-prem in a co-location, or I can use infrastructure like AWS, Azure, or Google to do that AI inferencing, but it's accessing my own enterprise data. Well, there's a couple challenges that we have to solve for. One is, it's very expensive to run on someone else's hardware. So maybe we want to look at what kind of AI inferencing models could we run at the edge locally using GPU-enabled hardware for it. The other is the security control, right? What can it access and what can't it access? And sometimes the traditional firewall doesn't have the right levels of security control, and we have to expand on that. And I know, Ken, you've been working with a lot of customers around AI initiatives, especially around how do they start getting more out of their own data? How do they start enabling their end users and their customers to use what they already have, on-prem or in cloud instances? What are some of the struggles you're seeing, and how are you helping them with that?
So, through this journey, everyone's felt the same pain, and even Insight. Now, we drink our own Kool-Aid when it comes to technology. So, what we actually talk about and recommend, we actually do internally. So, when it came to AI, we actually had a security policy: no one touch it. Well, that really wasn't no one touched ChatGPT or any of the AI solutions. What they were saying was, do not use any Insight information when you are testing these instances. So what we did was we actually took a instance and brought it inside our firewall so that we can consume it internally. And when it comes to AI, you don't know what you don't know. So opening it up and allowing all of Insight, actually it started with a smaller group, but once that smaller group was able to leverage it, understand it, play with it, get more familiar with it, then it opened up to the larger group of everyone within Insight. Then you start to unwrap the solutions that it could come up with, some of the things that you did not know that you could do. And we actually had several teammates come up with solutions within our warehouse and some of our delivery services that actually helped us save time and money. So whenever we have an AI conversation, we always go to the customer and says, do you want to do AI? Which means that, are you going to build it, or do you want to consume it? And if so, how do you want to consume it? Now, when it comes to the modern edge, we actually have two plays. We have it for the modern edge and the tools that we're going to use to leverage that modern edge for the organization, and the enablement of leveraging AI for whatever business purposes you are doing at that edge. So it all depends on, and both conversations we could actually have. So it doesn't matter what approach you're going to do. Now, that's the reason why Insight came up with an offering. It's called Insight Lens. And what that allows our customers to do is consume AI in a safe manner. Whatever you put in it is not going to end up on the internet or someone's blog. It is yours internally. It is isolated behind the firewall to make sure that your IP does not go out anywhere else. It stays within your organization. And then you can start to open it up to identify where can you see those cost savings, those benefits, the streamlining of your operations, or just how can you be more efficient at what you do. Any of those things are under the sun, right, when it comes to AI. And people are still unwrapping that onion. And it's one of those things where we don't know what the potential is until we get in there and just start crowdsourcing it. Let people work with it, let people operate it in a safe and controlled manner. That's critical. So the offering is Lens. If you have any questions about it, feel free to go back up on insight.com. We have great information about it. Worked with several organizations to help them consume AI. But as far as the trends are concerned, and it comes to the security and securing that edge, we have to leverage AI. Because of the fact that the attack vectors that are currently in place now and in the future, they're using AI to attack you. And we're humans. We don't think as fast as AI is. We need those resources to defend against those attacks. And if you don't leverage that tool, you're going to find yourself behind. And unfortunately, when you're talking about cybersecurity, that usually ends up being some sort of attack or breach. So with that said, you got anything else on AI?
No, I think the way to really summarize all that from an AI trend is you can consume it in two ways. Products that it's already built in, and you should expect that from vendors like Cisco as we continue to innovate that across our collab, networking, and security product sets. But then also leveraging and consuming AI in your own infrastructure on your own data, to Ken's point. And that takes some services. That takes some real thought leadership around what's the best way to build that, and how do I want to leverage an inferencing model to access certain parts of data but not access others internally and ensure it's fully secure, but also is running on optimized hardware. And that's where Cisco and Insight have really partnered together in a very close-knit relationship to deliver both the networking, the data center compute, and the security functionality to have a core packaged AI inferencing type of offer.
So at this point, we're going to go ahead and shift gears and talk about the technology and any of the technology that is leveraging the modern edge and how our customers are consuming it. So I think the first topic we want to cover is, of course, the WAN modernization. You know, when I got started in this industry, it was dial-up, it was T1s, it was fractional T1s, and then ATM. I dated myself, but that's okay. But where are you seeing, you know, the biggest changes as far as that WAN optimization or WAN modernization?
Yeah, well, first it's getting off of ATMs, but second, it's really starting to move away from some of the private circuits. You know, so trust me, even though that is somewhat dating things, there's plenty of customers out there that are still on very older and legacy type WAN deployments, especially in rural areas where they may not have had high speed connections available to them, and there's only a single last mile provider that they are offering a service to. And so some of it has been a migration into transport independence, the ability to leverage direct internet at much faster speeds with much lower costs, and then also moving into a 4G or 5G failover mechanism if needed, or even leveraging that as a primary circuit so that they get redundancy built in, able to ensure that they won't face as many outages or downtime. But even in brownout scenarios where there's high latency or loss, but it's not a total fault or outage, that they can still have dynamic failovers that are occurring and leverage other links that are available to them. So it's this migration away from those private circuits that are historically very expensive and typically not as fast, but maybe have a high SLA, a high level of uptime and availability, to moving into several direct internet paths where I've got faster bandwidth, lower speed, but it might not be as reliable. I need something at the edge that's intelligent enough to be able to load balance that, something that is very aware of my application performance. And so the migration into transport independence, but an intelligent device that is application aware, becomes critical. And the other element to that is moving into a centralized orchestration model. So I want my data plane to be very diverse, very dispersed across multiple transports and have many ways of accessing the destination I want to get to. But I want to start consolidating what my control plane and control plane and orchestration plane looks like. So cloud-based management or an on-prem controller, but is able to drive an intent-based policy pushed across all of my edges. And that WAN modernization aspect can be driven in a very simple way. So take our offering around Meraki, where you point and click, say, yeah, I want a couple hubs, a couple spokes here and there, and it just dynamically builds those tunnels for me with very little configuration. Or I could get very granular into what that configuration needs to look like. And with Catalyst SD-WAN, we can support, you know, tens of thousands of sites from a service provider network side and tens of gigs of throughput to hundreds of gigs in a hub. So from a size and scaling perspective, it can be as simple or as complicated as what your existing network is. And I think that's an opportunity for us to look at how are we currently configured today? What are our current route policies? And do we need the advanced SD-WAN functionality, or can we start to simplify our operations? A great example is when we look at some of the largest fast food chains in the world. They're primarily using Meraki. And they're able to handle the scale. They've got, you know, thousands, if not tens of thousands of sites. And it's because it's just simple. It's very low touch deployment provisioning. It's able to spin up those tunnels easily and dynamically with automatic failover. And I don't need a massive staff of IT networking to understand complicated deployments like a DMVPN on CLI. Just not needed. Like, let's keep it easy. But with that said, SD-WAN doesn't have to be for everyone, right? I mean, there's a mix out there. And Ken, being in the field talking with their customers every day, what are you seeing from a migration standpoint? And is SD-WAN for everyone, or is it just for certain verticals and markets?
Well, no, actually, so there's always the opportunity for SD-WAN capabilities, but it's not a requirement to enable that modern edge. We are seeing customers that still have the old school, you know, routers. old school firewalls at the edge, where they still need to have that capability, but aren't there with going to the latest and greatest SD-WAN. But again, it's everyone's individual journey, and we can walk them through each and every way. It doesn't matter where they're starting from, whether it was built up from tech debt or the fact that there's physical limitations. As you said, out in the rural areas, there may not be able to have multiple connection options. They may have to have a second alternative, which is maybe even bringing in like private 5G or Wi-Fi 6 to do that last mile capabilities. So it depends on where they're coming from. But again, everyone starts from a different, area. But again, we want to achieve what that end goal is and to provide those services at the edge, which brings up the next topic, which is wireless technology and enabling the modern edge. Now, Wi-Fi 6, private 5G, we actually have a case study that's on insight.com that actually covers this. We have a bottling manufacturer that was called Insight in to do a wireless assessment. And our team went out there, they started the interview process, and they go through their wireless assessment from end to end. And through this process, they're identifying that this particular manufacturer has automated forklifts within their warehouse. These forklifts are driven based on their Wi-Fi network. When there's a fault, if there's an issue with that network, the forklift goes through a reset, which is between 10 and 15 minutes. They were experiencing multiple faults within a day. So just imagine that. What is the disruption when you are actually moving these bottles around or these products around within the warehouse, and then everything stops? And it stops not because there's a physical issue of failure, but because the Wi-Fi dropped. So through this process, our team actually went in there, redesigned their wireless network, and reduced that faults to 95%, which, and if you calculate exactly the cost savings and the impact to the business, that is thousands and thousands and thousands of hours every year saved just by having a properly designed and implemented wireless network and leveraging the latest technologies. Because through this process, we wanted to make sure as you enable the business to function, to become, a business enabler, you have to make sure that it maintains security, that it doesn't become a point of entry, a breach, something that allows a bad actor to come in and cause issues within your organization. So it has to be delivered safely and securely. And through that, and again, if you have any questions or you wanted to look into that case study, it's actually on insight.com. But it's one of those things where we can show how we enable it. We also have another case study that during the pandemic, school systems were struggling with providing the educational system to underserved areas. We actually went in and implemented and designed and implemented a private 5G solution for a Western city. And it's the offering allowed them to serve basically all the students within the area, over 7,000 plus students, and they provided them with free Wi-Fi within the area. These are just some of the things that you're able to provide, and it's outside the box. This is in the public sector, the retail. Some of these offerings, it doesn't matter what vertical you align this with, there's always opportunity to leverage the Wi-Fi 6 and the private 5G in interesting ways that allow you to enable that business.
Now, Ken, I might have to not disagree there, but I think we have to be cautionary, right? Because not every single customer has a requirement for this. And sometimes things like Wi-Fi 6E and private 5G are engineering overkill. We can solve them with simpler technologies at times, but there are absolutely environments that can benefit from it. And sometimes that's tough to navigate. I've worked with a number of customer clients where they say, hey, we heard about this brand new thing. We want to incorporate it. When we go through their actual business requirements, it's overkill. We say, well, have you even tried this first? A great example of that, I remember working with a manufacturing customer on my own a year or so ago, and they were redesigning an entire warehouse facility, 300,000 square feet. They had massive 25-foot racks for storing things. And to your point of the forklifts, now they weren't automated, but they would do inventory based on their Wi-Fi networking using the forklifts and scanners. And when we were designing their wireless system, they were thinking, is this a good example of usage for private 5G? Should we use 5G across this warehouse? And we got to thinking, it was like, well, why? I mean, we can install directional antennas with Wi-Fi 6 and have you connected on the local wireless network and ensure that roaming is going to work well, but do beamforming down each one of these racks. And that became the much more efficient and cost-efficient methodology around deployment. And they didn't have to get trained up on a new technology like private 5G. So I think that's what we have to consider. And sometimes it's hard to navigate because we hear a lot of marketing materials from a number of vendors. And Cisco's no different. We put a lot of stuff out there because we've got plenty of products that are available. But sometimes it makes sense to bring in the experts, bring in consultants, bring in a joint partnership like Insight and Cisco and evaluate out of all the options that are out there, what actually makes sense for you. And a great example that we're seeing right now is all the chatter around Wi-Fi 7. I mean, we just got 6 and 6E. We don't even have most of our customers on 6 quite yet. And now we're already talking about building Wi-Fi 7 before it's fully ratified. It just feels like we're jumping the gun a bit. And do we really need that extra, 6 gigahertz for all of your office? Probably not. Would it be helpful for a massive auditorium environment or a stadium? Sure. But let's look at the use case. Let's look at the vertical and make sure that it actually makes sense for your environment and that we're not over-engineering and over-complicating things. And that certainly becomes a challenge around any security or any technology in general. And I've got security on the mind here because I'm thinking about how I've seen a lot of vendors and customers overcomplicate their security approach. And so that becomes the next technology aspect for us here is how do we incorporate a easy and fundamental way of deploying security without complicating our infrastructure, without complicating the hardware needs. And we got into this a little bit before, but it's that concept of starting to move some of the inspection out to the cloud. Because as we're distributing our applications and we're distributing our users and devices, trying to scale all of that infrastructure at a local edge or in an on-prem data center becomes very difficult, especially if I have to ramp up new branches, new facilities really quickly, and I got to buy hardware that'll support all of the new security controls that I need around decryption and inspection and segmentation. That's tough. And so what we've started to see is the shift into secure access service edge or the security service edge install around cloud security. And that really benefits customers in a couple of ways, mainly around simplicity. You now get a unified policy for outbound inspection of your branch and the devices and those IoTs and sensors, but as well for a roaming user. They don't have to be turning on VPN to get that egress security inspection. It's now intercepted by a client. The same thing goes for private application access. It used to be before where I would have one methodology of security inspection if you were on-prem and one methodology if you were roaming or out of my network. And that doesn't make sense anymore. To your point earlier around zero trust, Ken, of segmentation and least privilege access, it should be the same access control no matter where you're originating from. I need to go through what's your risk profile and who are you and who are you who you say you are and what's your device. And that access should be through the same infrastructure. And so a cloud-based security solution allows us to move into that simplicity. It allows us to build that type of policy. But with that type of simplicity doesn't always mean that it's going to solve for every use case. When we think about modern edge, there's that aspect of sensors talking to local infrastructure, maybe local compute or an AI model that's on-prem. And sometimes cloud doesn't make sense there, right? Because now I'm hairpinning traffic. I'm sending it out just to bring it back. So Ken, in your mind, where do we use cloud security, and maybe where do we still do on-prem?
I think it goes back to that. What is the business use case? What is the business driver? And again, it doesn't fit everyone. We have instances where the on-prem solution works flawlessly without the necessity to go out and actually leverage some of the cloud resources. And then on the other side, where it's actually the best thing that they can do is leverage the cloud and go all in. And then, of course, the hybrid solution. You're going to have a little bit of mix of both, but understanding what the drivers are can help determine what tools you're going to use as far as enabling the modern edge. And it doesn't matter if it's, again, on-prem, leveraging your existing infrastructure, or leveraging the cloud. Now that brings up the next access control. Access control is a huge question in a lot of people's minds, is because of the fact that we need to make sure that we understand who's accessing our networks, what's accessing our networks, and how are they accessing our networks. That is crucial in today's age. Again, security above all else. What are you seeing on the edge? How does Cisco solve for that?
Yeah, so this is where we get into that trends conversation and buzzword soup of network access control versus zero trust network access. They sound like they should be the exact same thing, right? But from a technology standpoint, they're actually pretty different. When you think about network access control in the traditional sense, usually that is using technology like 802.1x and MAC authentication bypass, where I'm doing profiling at the edge of my access layer. So wireless authentication and wired. And then I might do some level of posturing and profiling integrated to my remote access. But ZTNA, as it's been used by Gartner and Forrester and a lot of the OEMs out there from a SASE perspective, is really addressing modernizing a private access approach. So getting off of a traditional VPN model where I've got a full singular network-based tunnel and moving into a micro-tunnel-based approach where per application access, dynamic tunneling built, and I'm going to inspect traffic as it comes back into my infrastructure. So think about, Bob from finance is working from home and wants to access their finance application, rather than turning on VPN and having all this lateral access through the internal network. Bob only gets access to that finance app. So ZTNA is intercepting that web traffic and saying, okay, I know how to access it. We're going to build this one tunnel just to that one private application. And that works great for client-initiated apps where a laptop needs to access a private resource, but where that falls through is things like server-initiated applications or peer-to-peer applications, collab-type apps, or some long-tooth or legacy apps or latency-sensitive applications. And what we've learned from a lot of our customer base as we're talking to them about moving into a more modern-day ZTNA approach is that they're still dependent on VPN for certain applications. And what we've learned in that journey is you need to have infrastructure that supports both, because you can't always get 100% of your apps to support client-initiated flows. And with that said, then we want to be able to support that VPN as a service and more of a modern-day zero-trust network access in the same deployment. And that's been a core initiative for us with Cisco Secure Access. Now, that is complementary to what we do with Identity Services Engine, which is that network access control. And so when you think about how we support the edge, you have someone that is on the network already and is driving that 802.1x and MAC authentication bypass type initiative. That's where you would use Identity Services Engine. And if you want someone that is roaming or at another branch and has private application access to your on-prem infrastructure or cloud infrastructure, that's where we'd use Secure Access. And what we're working on right now is a native tie-in to share identity and posture between the two, so that you have a truly unified zero trust approach end to end, no matter if someone's accessing your network from a switch or the Wi-Fi, or if they're coming in as a remote user. And I think that that's a very important distinction, because there's no other SASE vendor out there that's doing proper NAC the way Cisco's been from a switch and wireless perspective, and then tying that in for zero trust network access. So if you're hearing those terms, we're going into buzzword soup. NAC and ZTNA historically are not the same thing when our other vendors are talking about their capabilities and where they play well.
I actually have a case study that highlights leveraging ICE, and it actually does deal with healthcare. Because again, when you are actually setting up a profile from a manufacturer's MAC address, well, you have manufacturers within the healthcare systems that cover everything from notepads to some of the devices they leverage for their data entry into crash carts into MRI systems. And applying the profile to the appropriate device to make sure that it is restricted access as more or less is crucial. And leveraging ICE with some even third-party vendors like Order and some of the other guys allow you to actually create those profiles for the individual devices on the edge so that you can keep them optimally secure. And I know that was a hard word to say, but it is something that we've actually seen and with quite success with several healthcare facilities down in Florida and across the Southeast. And it gives them that extra level of security to identify the differences between just the MAC address.
Well, and that's the hard part of it, right? I mean, that's really difficult to do. Wi-Fi is, I don't want to say easy, but it's easier because there's only certain devices that'll connect to the Wi-Fi network. But when I can plug just any type of device in, an IoT device or a healthcare device, in on the wired side, it's tough to know what that device is actually doing and how it's interfacing with the network. And so what Identity Services Engine's been doing for years is it's been building this massive library of profiles from a lot of the manufacturing vendors, from the healthcare vendors that are out there, so that we already know what the device is, and you don't have to go and build a lot of custom definitions, that it's going to work out of the box. Every single one of our software updates usually is coming out with a new pack of 50 or 100 device profiles of new devices that we see coming online that we've profiled that our customers are asking for, so that you don't have to go and do the hard work of manually and custom defining everything that doesn't use 802.1x.
Yep. Now we're going to transition to the last set within the technology, and it's observability. Observability is near and dear to my heart because it ties in so much with security. I have 3 rules when it comes to security, and it is verify, verify, and verify. If you can't verify it, it's false, and you can't take action on it. Well, observability
allows realtors, location, right?
And observability allows you to do that, allows you to see and report on what's existing on your network, how it is operating from end to end. It gives you all the tools that you need to see how it's functioning, where it's functioning, why it's functioning. And with this data, and again, with a lot of data comes great responsibility. It has a lot of noise. Having the ability to go through the noise and identify any of the outliers, identify anything that might be seen as whether it's a security incident or a predictive failure or additional resources are needed. Consuming and processing the data at the edge is crucial. It is the organization's data. Providing that information back, they might be able to identify, increase efficiencies at the edge, whether it's a manufacturing plant, whether it's a logistics company. But having that data, no matter where that edge is, no matter where they're located within the internet or around the world, having that, being able to consume that data and use it for, predictive analytics or, and case in point, rerouting of, truck lines around storms or around, or even just around traffic jams. This data is theirs. They need to leverage it. Observability allows you to do it. And what we're seeing is that leveraging things like Thousand Eyes for that end user experience for applications, to the FSO platform, consuming the data from internal resources within their networks, within their platforms, their compute systems, within their data centers, within the cloud, so that they can identify any bottlenecks. If there's slowness in performance, where that slowness is, identify faults so that they can more rapidly correct them. What are you seeing from?
Yeah, I think what it really comes down to, and Thousand Eyes is an excellent example of monitoring the network, is to be able to very quickly determine with a high level of confidence, is this a problem that I can fix? And is this something, or is this something that I have no control over? For example, a SaaS application or something with a service provider that they need to go and fix. And, in security, we use metrics and KPIs like mean time to detection and mean time to resolution, right? How fast can I determine where the problem is, and how fast can I fix it? And networking uses similar constructs around that. But what I really want to be able to do is mean time to understanding, is this my problem? I know there's an issue. I've detected a problem. My users are complaining, but is it my problem? Or do I need to go and elevate this to my SaaS provider or to my cloud infrastructure team or to my service provider? And that becomes something that's such a burden on the networking team historically. And if they can say with confidence, nope, not me. Like I'm showing you right here, this is outside of our network edge. This is away from what we have deployed. This is our service provider. This is a security policy. This is application performance, but it's not me. That is a huge benefit to overall IT teams because everyone loves to blame the network. Yeah. And what we have to think about here is it's not just the historical network device out of band monitoring, like CPU and RAM utilization or link utilization. I mean, that stuff's good. We want that. It's still going to tell us if we're having device failures or not. But I want things like synthetic tests and path visualization. Tell me from the endpoint all the way to the application, every single step of the way, how it's performing and where there's a problem. And I can set custom thresholds for it. Or tell me from an end user's perspective that is unmanaged. Let's say it's a customer's app with a high level of confidence. If I'm hosting an application, how that app is performing. So I can leverage cloud agents that are globally distributed and tell me, is the app that I run actually causing problems for my customer base or for unmanaged devices? Historically, we would have never had that type of data, but now we do. And that observability becomes absolutely critical as we not only are moving into a modern edge, but are also fundamentally re-architecting the way our data flows. I mean, when we think back to things like cloud security that we were talking about, our AI models and where those apps live and how they're communicating to our storage databases, we're re-architecting the data flows here. And when we go through that process, you don't want to just be monitoring it after the fact. You need a baseline of how it's performing today, right? Where's traffic currently flowing? And then as I go through that migration, I know, is the new policy setup actually doing what I wanted to do? And then after the fact, are there any new problems that are occurring? So we have to set up observability almost before we take on a lot of these other modern edge initiatives, because I want that visibility as I go through that migration. Absolutely.
Now, at this point, we're going to shift gears and go into tactics. Now,
we all talked about good stuff, right? These are things we want to do, but how the heck do we get started?
Yeah, that's correct. So, and when we talk about, tactics or implementation for the modern edge, we have to talk about the different frameworks or approaches to this. What do you see? How do you see, or what do you recommend for organizations to actually leverage the modern edge?
There's a lot of ways to approach it, and you can absolutely go custom with it. If you feel confident in your design, you've been consulting with experts like at Insight and Cisco, and you feel really good about your topology, great. But most people don't have that level of confidence, and they want to lean into something that's tried, true, and tested, right? And so a framework style approach is usually what addresses that initial need. What can I baseline off of and then customize from there? The nice thing about frameworks is it usually doesn't tell you specifically the things you have to go buy or deploy. It's going to tell you more about the policy, the things to keep in mind, the infrastructure implications, and some of the trends that we're currently seeing that we want to be able to utilize. So items around secure access service edge and SD-WAN, or zero trust, maybe mesh networking or converged computing, especially when we're starting to lean into inferencing AI models on-prem. Those are all frameworks that you can take as a baseline and then build your infrastructure upon, knowing this is an opportunity to, one, remove technical debt, modernize your approach, but two, it gives you the comfort that there's experts out there that have already validated that this is going to work. And that framework-based approach needs a little customization and understanding, okay, this is what I want to accomplish. It's giving me a blueprint of roughly how I can accomplish it, but I need to get it into the details. And that's when a services engagement with a company like Insight can really set you apart, right? You need to address that customization. And Ken, I'd love to hear from you, your experience in working boots on the ground with your customers day to day, how you set up customization around those frameworks.
So typically, our typical engagement, we sit down and we do workshops with the customer. We identify what their business needs are, what the enablers are, and then look at their existing infrastructure and then take it piece by piece. Leveraging what they have. Again, we don't go out there and say, oh, well, you just need everything shiny and new. Because of the fact that no one has that open checkbook. They don't have unlimited funds. I wish they did. That would be awesome, but they don't, right? So we need to find.
Personally, I got a lot of things around the house I'd love to do.
That's right. And it's one of those where when we identify the opportunities to, again, leverage what they have in place, and it may be something as simple as just upgrading firmware or, just some easy tasks that they may not have been able to do. They built up that technical debt because of constraint in resources. But engaging them, identify what they have, and get them to a point that they can identify where they want to be. Once we know that, we could build that design and then do that gap analysis on how to get there. And we do many different approaches to it. The quick and easy, and again, it's never quick, it's never easy, but there are some things that are a little bit more streamlined for their needs. And then the recommended way, which is this is the best practice approach. These are the frameworks. This is how you want to do it. And again, if they can't bite off everything at first, moving in that direction is crucial. Identify the key issues that they want to address, create the solution for those, and then build towards that. It is a process. It's that consultative process that we go through with each and every one of our customers. And we try to leverage all the technologies that are available to us, and at the, with the customers, what resources they have and their, time frames in which they want to implement this. So it all depends. And I hate saying that, but it does. It's that you're not ever going to find two networks identically the same. You're not going to find two organizations or two customers exactly the same. So trying to fit those, triangle pegs and round pegs into a square hole is, well, that's why we do what we do, right? We help them, we shape them, we get them to where they need to be, and then implement it for them. And again, every framework needs to be customized. We're not going to take something and say, oh, here, NIST, Zero Trust Network Access. This is what we're implementing. Everything has to be structured for the customer. Everything has to be worked through for that customer, because the customer are going to have those individual variables that have to be taken into consideration. If you don't, that's when the issues occur. So one of the things that we use to actually help us through that process is management and automation through that process. There's an old saying, if you do it more than once, automate it. That there's some truth to that, because of the fact that the more you automate, the more consistent result you're going to have. So if you've done it once, you want to do it again, automate it so that every time you do it, you get the same expected outcome. And we do that with our implementations, well, for us as a company, but then we also apply that to the customer so that we can help the customer automate their operations, making sure that their patch management, their maintenance, or what have you, is structured in a way that they could have the expected outcome no matter what infrastructure that they have. So where are you seeing some of the use of the automation tools and techniques from the modern edge.
Yeah, the fun one there is, of course, every time you bring up automation, you're going to get an old school networking guy that says, I'm not a Python junkie. I don't want to go learn that stuff. I love my CLI. This is what I'm going to work with. And the truth is, that's not the only way to do automation. There's a lot of ways that you can leverage a centralized management tool set or a platform that already has it built in. And that's one of the key things that Cisco has been fundamentally working on. We want to provide the APIs and allow for custom automations where it's necessary. And I know Insight has done a lot of custom dev work with our APIs and our functionality, but we also build a number of automation capabilities natively within the toolset, natively within a platform. So you don't have to go and build this all yourself. We want to help you. We want to meet you where you're already at. And I think some of this comes down to what's the intent that I want to drive. We've got a large initiative going on right now around awareness of the power of the platform. And it's all about centralizing that orchestration plane and automating a lot of the functionality, no matter what infrastructure you want to be able to use. And so we have both cloud offering to host your security controls and your network controls, but we also have on-prem offerings, whether you're in the federal side or SLED, or maybe you just want to keep running things on-prem because that's how you like to run it. You don't want to go all SaaS-based. That's totally fine. We absolutely will support that and provide management capabilities and automation built into that management to be able to drive those outcomes and become more intent-based. Ultimately, we don't want you to go router by router, switch by switch, access point to access point, and manually configure things anymore. That is not a business ad, right? That is really just you doing busy work. And I think we know that now. We want to automate business processes, as well as automate more advanced security controls. And Ken, you brought this up earlier that from a security perspective, we have to leverage AI because humans just can't keep up anymore with all the threats. And so we don't expect you to go and build your own AI tool set into your cybersecurity, like your firewall. That should be expected out of your OEM. That should be expected out of providers like Cisco that enable you to leverage AI to empower your business decisions, to empower your networking and security capabilities. And so I think that's what you need to start challenging your existing infrastructure on, no matter who your provider is, to say, what are you doing to help me around automation? And what are you doing to help me around protecting my environment using tool sets like AI? Because if you're not providing that for me proactively, there are plenty of other providers that can, such as Cisco. And that's what it really comes down to at the end of the day here is we're not expecting you all to become the Python gurus of the world, but rather leverage AI and automation in your existing infrastructure using the power of a platform.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one of the offerings that Insight actually is leveraging for our customers, because some of our customers just does not have the capability to implement any of these solutions. So we actually have managed networking or infrastructure as a service offering to where the customer, all they want to do is pay a monthly fee or a yearly fee or a quarterly fee. And it just works. I just want it to work. I just want it to provide my business needs, and I want it to be secure. I want it to be manageable. And again, Insight will be doing the management. So it relieves that customer from having to deal with any of those operational issues. They just have a network, however it is, to be consumed by them for them to do business. Now, it's we actually partner with Cisco, and we have the hybrid cloud capabilities. We actually have a package deal with a couple of the other storage vendors with the hyperconverged solutions from Cisco and data center solutions. So it doesn't matter exactly what the needs are. We could actually provide that service and again manage it for you so that it is as a service has that predictive monthly cost and the comfort knowing that if there is an issue, if there is something that needs to be responded to, that you actually have an entire team behind that providing those solutions to it. So are you seeing
a myth buster for a second? Because there's a common myth I hear, actually there's two, around managed services with customers. One is, am I scapegoating? Am I just being almost lazy with this? Like, I don't feel right handing over the keys to my kingdom here, but we've just been running ourselves to exhaustion trying to keep up with the network. We have limited resources, limited availability of funds. We just can't train up or hire or retain talent anymore. And I feel like I'm just giving up by going managed. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And in fact, there's a plethora of customers moving this way, right? We're seeing a massive growth in the managed service offerings where customers are leaning into it. They're realizing they just need help. And to your point, Ken, that reoccurring known cost becomes a massive benefit. So don't feel like you're alone in looking at a managed service. We see massive amounts of growth of customers that are leaning into providers like Insight to drive a managed outcome. The other myth that's out there is, well, if they're going to give me managed network or managed security, the vendor doesn't matter. Why do I care? I'm paying for the outcome. So they should take care of it. I should be able to get the cheapest hardware, and Insight can deal with the headaches. And that's also a myth, right? You have to think about, how is that technology enabling your service provider to deliver the outcomes you want? At the end of the day, Insight has costs on their back end. We're going to give you a peek in the inside of this. They have to take time to validate the deployments, validate the software, enable functionality. And the easier it is and the more reliable it is, the faster that they can give you value, and the more that they can help around costs. And so the vendor of choice around that managed service that's powering those capabilities is absolutely critical, especially when it comes to security. Because when you think about security efficacy, you need a best-in-class threat intelligence feed that powers those enforcement points. And so providers like Insight can help you around configuration and defining policy and even manage detection and response. But that threat intel feed and making sure you've got those up-to-date capabilities is something that the vendor of choice is absolutely on the hook for. And leading with someone like Cisco with their Talos Intelligence Group, they are the largest threat intelligence organization out there globally, short of like the NSA. So when you think about the providers of reliability around features and capabilities and around security efficacy, they have to be empowering a provider like Insight to deliver those outcomes for you. So the vendor of choice around that managed service is absolutely critical. But Ken, I love that we've been doing the partnership here around those services, helping our customers in need that want to be able to deliver on these trends we've been talking about, but just may not be able to take on the how, may not be able to do it all in-house. And I know Cisco is committed to continuing that partnership with Insight.
Absolutely. And here at Insight, we do appreciate Cisco's partnership in all of our service offerings across the board. And with that, I think we're going to close out this event. I do appreciate your time, Dave, and everyone who's going to be watching on the web. We do appreciate our customers, our participation, and I really look forward to doing these in the future. We do have several of these events that will be online. If you're interested in any more, please go to insight.com and have a list of all the other upcoming events that we're going to have on LinkedIn or any of the existing videos that we have online. But I do appreciate everybody's participation, and thank you very much, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.